Good evening and welcome to the Black Hole. Today our topic is healing the wounds, understanding the cause and effect of domestic violence. So I chose this topic because I happen to witness a number of instances around me where people from any gender were violated in any form, details of which will be discussed in my presentation. We have actually here in the Black Hole we have mentioned the word domestic violence multiple times, but they are different, not necessarily on the topic itself, but through different topics. Here I will be discussing it on its own, domestic violence. So today we'll be understanding the cause and effect of it, why it happens, how it happens, and who suffers from it. The purple ribbon is used for to represent all the represent the domestic violence victims. Please, introduction. So, domestic violence is a form of abuse that can show in many ways. It affects most of the people in a household. Unfortunately, it occurs worldwide. In this presentation, we will explore what domestic violence is, why it happens, how it affects everyone, and what can one do about it. We will discuss today. Next, domestic abuse, also called, this is from the United Nations. This is how they define domestic violence. Domestic abuse, also called domestic violence or intimate partner violence, can be defined as pattern of behavior in any relationship that is used to gain or maintain power and control over an intimate partner. Abuse is physical, sexual, emotional, economic, or psychological actions or threats of action that influence another person. This includes any behaviors that frighten, intimidate, terrorize, manipulate, hurt, and humiliate, blame, injure, or wound someone. This can happen to anyone of any race, age, sexual orientation, religion, or gender. It can occur within a range of relationships, including couples who are married, living together, cohabitation, or just simply dating. Domestic violence affects people of all socioeconomic backgrounds and education levels. Like no matter whether you're in the below the poverty line or above the poverty line, or you don't have basic education qualification to highest education qualification, it affects everyone. So we will be normally we discuss of domestic violence as when we think of domestic violence, we think of intimate violent partner violence, basically like a guy or a woman, like a husband or a wife or boyfriend or girlfriend or whatever, fighting. I mean, like hurting each other and all that. But that's one picture. The picture is much bigger than that. Next slide, please. Overall, as I already mentioned, it is mostly worldwide, but in Pakistan this is very prevalent. Very prevalent. So, although we don't have much, we don't have proper statistics for it, but so far 90% of women in Pakistan have experienced some form of domestic violence at the hands of their husbands or families. 50% of women who experience domestic violence do not respond in any way and suffer silently. That we will discuss later. And barely 0.47% take the cases to court, and some have 47. Like you can see from these statistics that we happen to see here. They made actually. This is from the Express Tribune from the article where Pakistan's domestic violence law fails. Though we don't have official statistics of it, but this is the rough estimates we have. And this is so far against women, but I like to point out that as I say, it's much bigger than that. Please, next slide. So, domestic violence, as discussed in the introduction and from the definition by the United Nations, is actually it can manifest in different forms. It can happen physical violence, sexual violence, psychological abuse, emotional abuse, economic abuse, or some or all of them combined. So we'll be discussing each of them. Like physical violence involves the use of physical force against other, like it could be grabbing, biting, restraining, shaking, choking, and all that. Sexual violence involves violation of individuals' bodily integrity, like in sexual assault, including coercing sexual contact, rape, and prostitution. There is unwelcome sexual behavior like harassment, and including treating someone in a sexually demeaning manner over any others. And psychological abuse often characterizes intimidation, threats of harm, and isolation. Examples include instilling fear in an intimate partner through threatening behavior such as damaging property or abusing pets, constant supervision. Also, emotional abuse involves undermining an individual's sense of self-worth. Example of emotional abuse includes constant criticism, name calling, mocking, humiliating, and all that, and etc. This is from Stop Violence Against Women. They talk about forms of domestic violence. Next, please. Yes, there's also economic abuse. I will be coming to that as well. Next. So, signs of domestic violence. Some of us may not be familiar with what domestic violence is. So, signs of it include ignoring a partner's feelings. This is from the emotional abuse part. There are in fact ignoring a partner's feelings, ridiculing or insulting women as a group, not just women, but any gender as a group. In ridiculing and insulting valued beliefs, religion, race, heritage, or class, withholding approval, appreciation, or affection as punishment, continuously criticizing, condemning, and all that. Humiliating partners in private or public spheres, refusing to socialize with people who are important to the partner, taking car keys, cell phones, or other means of communication away, like cutting off contact with the outside, isolation, and regulatory threatening to leave or told to leave, not allowing access to basic needs like medication and all that. Sometimes, so for example, if you have some people, they have diabetes, which in Pakistan is very common. Sometimes as a form of abuse, they just like, okay, I'm taking away this insulin or whatever, insulin and other such medication as a and not allowing such. And then next we have gaslighting or crazy making. I will explain gaslighting. Gaslighting is like basically gaslighting is manipulating someone using psychological methods into questioning their own sanity or powers of reasoning. This is from Google. If you search up in Google, this is what definition you get. So sometimes abusers, they come up with phrases which questions your own, which is basically meant to question your own sanity or powers of reasoning, which include, some of the phrases include, that never happened, I don't know what you're talking about, it's all your fault, what about the time you did this or that, you're overreacting, everyone thinks you're crazy, and or I would never hurt you on purpose, or such phrases. So by doing these phrases and all that, basically the questioning your sanity and all that, which basically gives them more control over the victim. Crazy making is basically like a gaslight. Is basically gaslighting is like the verbal tactics. Gaslighting also involves more than verbal, like physical and all that. Some include examples of crazy making behavior may include they make decisions without you and claim it was your idea. Like basically they made a whole decision yourself, but at the end they're like, it was you who decided when you had actually nothing to do with it. They can call you crazy on the slightest pretext. For example, when you look up in the night sky, sometimes there are different constellations. You just point out like, this must be a Capricorn constellation. Sometimes in normal situation, some people just disagree and say, no, maybe it is not Capricorn constellation, maybe it's Cancer constellation. But here in this case, it will be, are you crazy? This is not Capricorn. This is like like treating you as like as if you have very done like calling you crazy on slightly pretext. Then they criticize your decisions and blame ability for them. Like you make one decision, and sometimes when we make decisions, we do make mistakes. It happens, but they will criticize you for that. The abusers, and then they ask you to do something, and then they ask. Like for example, they ask you like, okay, can you get me, for example, a cup of tea? They give you, okay, you bring them a cup of tea, and they say, I did not ask for that. So that's crazy making for you. Then it continues with abandoning someone in a dangerous place. Like, for example, if there's a rush in a street, they will just abandon you and pretend like and all that, which is very dangerous. And then it can go with threatening to hurt or kill family members, like using threats, punishing or depriving the children when angry, threatening to kidnap the children, abusing, torture, killing pets, harassing partners about imagined affairs, manipulating partners with lies and contradictions, destroying furniture, punching holes in the walls or breaking appliances, wielding weapons in a threatening way. Like basically all that. That's emotional abuse. Signs of it. Second is physical abuse. This one is pretty much what you will see, what most of us imagine. And actually, it is portrayed when it is portrayed in film and dramas and all that. This is what they usually show. So physical abuse will include pushing, kicking, slapping, punching, or scratching, pulling or ripping out hair, strangling, biting, spitting at or near partner, throwing objects at or near partner, subjecting someone to reckless driving, using household objects as weapons, threatening partner with weapons, non-consensual rough play such as martial arts, MMA, self-defense techniques. Like they may say like, oh, we are just playing around, but it's just basically excusing the physical actions and all. And this is very much what you hear in Pakistan. Very much abuse that results in lacerations. I'm not sure how it's pronounced. Broken bones, internal injuries or miscarriages. Miscarriages in case of ladies who are pregnant at the time of the abuse. Abuse that lead to disfigurement or disability, like in acid attacks back in 2010s and 2000s. They were acid attacks common around. In newspapers, they will show every other day. The newspaper show up, or disability. And in Pakistan, we are notoriously known for that. And sometimes it leads to it ends up in murder. Murder case. That's physical abuse for you. Next, please. Sexual abuse. Sexual abuse can include birth control sabotage, like sabotage, reproduction coercion, using a sexual derogatory name, forcing a partner to strip. Strip basically means forcibly removing someone, basically removing clothes. Forcing a partner to become a sex worker or prostitute. Accusing a partner of promiscuity, basically like you accuse them of like you're adultery or like you're cheating on me or something. Forcing a partner to watch pornography, or abusive partner have sexual intercourse with others. Subjecting the partner to unwanted touching, basically harassment and all that. Forcing a partner to participate in any form of unwanted sexual activity. And then biting, pinching, or hurting a partner with objects during sexual intercourse. And then sexually assaulting a partner, which basically which these days we are observing. That's sexual abuse. It may sound a bit distressing for people out there. Carry on. Next. Financial economic abuse. Now, sometimes economics also play a role in economics also play a role when it comes to domestic violence. So what it includes is having all bank accounts in the abuser's name. Like sometimes you have joint bank accounts when you get married or when you're in a relationship or something. So what they will do sometimes is having all bank accounts in the abuser's name, and as you know, in transactions, when it's in their name, unless they don't unless you don't get their signature or something. Until then, you can't do any bank transactions. Controlling how, when, and where money is spent. Assigning an allowance. In the previous point, sometimes they will ask, okay, where did this money go and all that. Assigning an allowance of a very small or unrealistic cost of living, like, okay, I will give you this amount of money to run this whole thing, but sometimes very little to that. Like, even if you spend all the money, you still have like debts to pay and all that. Like, not enough to run a kitchen or whatever. Denying a partner the right to work outside the home or making any financial contribution to the family. This is very much in Pakistan. You see that sometimes, and especially when ladies get married, some of the partners or like in-laws, they say to them like, no, you don't need to go to work, or like it looks bad if you work, like what will people say? So then at the end, the husband or like the other partner takes all the job, and actually, when that happens, it becomes their means of justification, like why they make such decision. Like I am contributing the funds to run this house and all that, so I have a much bigger say to how this household runs. So here we have that, and then controlling all or most of the finances. Here the abusers themselves control all what's going on, how things are to be spent, and sometimes they make investments which are like which can be hurtful to the household. And then misusing a partner's name for financial reason. That also happens. And they're forcing partner to sign documents against them, such as taxes, immigration papers, or other important documents. Sometimes to avoid some legal problems, legal issues regarding taxes and all that, the abusers, they will ask, okay, you sign this document, like all that. So like if the Federal Board of Revenue has to start tracing out what is going on, any suspicious activity, then basically the wife, the intimate partner also gets dragged in. So that's economic abuse here. Like how economics also play a role in this whole domestic violence. Next slide, please. Now, why I have included this slide is why I included this slide is because I am of the belief. You may disagree with me, but I'm of the belief like it can be sorted. So, since you may be an abuser, I believe that whenever there's a problem, the first step to solving any problem is acknowledging there is a problem. So some of the abusers may not be aware that what they are doing. So there are some abusers, I believe, I may be wrong, but I believe that there are some abusers who might want to change and all that. So first step to solving any problem is acknowledging that what they're doing is wrong. So most people don't like to acknowledge that they are harming others, but admitting that you may be hurting your partner is a prerequisite to changing your ways. So, if you suspect that you may be abusing someone or something, you try asking yourself if you get angry, insecure, or possessive about your partner's relationship with others, including friends, family, or co-workers. Frequently call or text your partner to check up on them, or make them or expect them to check in with you, or monitor their movements or behaviors. Feel like your partner needs your permission to go out, get a job, go to school, or spend time with others. Get upset when your partner won't act the way you want them to do, or do the things you want. Blame your anger or actions on drugs, alcohol, on your partner's own actions. Express your anger by threatening to harm or actually harming your partner. Express your anger by raising your voice, name calling, or insults. Prevent your partner from spending money and controlling your partner's spending. Require that they have an allowance and or monitor the spending. Force or try to force your partner to be intimate with you, or get angry or upset if they don't want to. or get angry over small incidents or mistakes you blame your partner for. Next slide, please. Sometimes maybe you may not exactly ask yourself and all that, but sometimes it can be, you can visibly see it in your partner, like okay, maybe you might be harming them. So other signs that your behavior is abusive, maybe observe your partner's reaction to you. Ask yourself if they seem nervous around you, seem afraid of you, feel, flinch, cringe, or retreat when you're emotional, like basic flight and flight freeze and fight response. Cry because of something you prevented them from doing or from something you made them to do. Seem scared or unable to contradict you or speak up around you. Restrict your own interactions with friends, family, co-workers, others in order to avoid upsetting you. I may sound a bit too optimistic here, though I should at this in topic like this I shouldn't be optimistic. But we all are humans. We may want to seek change. So here's something to maybe ponder about, or maybe first step to changing your ways. Though I know for sure, I'm not sure about all abuses, but some glimmer of some minority of some glimmer of hope, I would say. Next, please. I don't think this is going well, anyways. Now, causes of domestic violence. Now we come to causes of domestic violence. Well, as I said, mentioned before, domestic violence is a worldwide phenomenon. No matter whichever part of the world you go, even in the West, which is where gender equality is all that. Still, it happens. So, causes of domestic violence is like cultural factors, not just in ours, but in many cultures. Many patriarchal cultures have permitted the beating and chastising of women and children who are viewed as man's property. In addition, the concept of women's sexuality is often tied to the family's honor. Therefore, any actions or behaviors by a woman that are perceived as acts of dishonor toward the family are met with judgment and abuse. That's cultural factor. Legal factors. Law enforcement agencies tend to treat domestic abuse as a private family matter and sometimes hesitate to intervene or get involved. Acts of domestic abuse is often treated with more leniency than crimes committed by strangers. In fact, sexual abuse by intimate partners is not even recognized as a crime in many cultures. Economic factors. Lack of economic resources is often associated with domestic abuse. I remember, this is a bit out of context, so please forgive me for that. I remember in Bill Clinton's presidential candidate, there was this saying, "His economy is stupid." So, economy also plays a role when it comes to domestic abuse. As I explained earlier. Environmental factors. People who have grown up in abusive environments have witnessed or experienced abuse as children may be more likely to perpetrate domestic abuse as adults. This is referred to as the intergenerational cycle of abuse. We'll be discussing that too. Social factors. Society still tends to blame victims of being abused, which can make it difficult for them to come forward and report the abusers. Victims are often scrutinized minutely, and any imperfections are held against them. This victim blaming and all that, this is very much prominent around. Substances use, excessive use of substances such as alcohol and drugs can lead to domestic abuse. In countries like, I remember I have been watching some Korean films when it comes to domestic abuses, it often happens because of alcohol and all that. So this is one example I can give you. This is please next slide. This is for worldwide context. This is from worldwide perspective. Now, as far as Pakistan is concerned, the causes of domestic violence against women in Pakistan. This is from Harim Said et al. Slide 8 in his presentation. against women in Pakistan include women's low education levels, low empowerment, and least opportunity to indulge in political activities. So basically, what he's saying is that basically, like, the woman, he was talking about women, but it can be with anyone. Like, not many of our people are aware of their rights, are knowledgeable enough that what is being done against them is totally wrong and all that. And even if they are aware, which is like amongst very well-read people, like people who have knowledge, they don't exactly have the empowerment to do it, or have little opportunities to indulge in little empowerment, like to report to the police and all that, or least opportunities to indulge in political activities, like to like make legislation and all that. I mean, we have done a lot, legislation-wise, we have done a lot, but still there's still we still have a long way to go. Actually, he used the wording low education levels, but I like that even some people, especially in the ladies, even in the village, they know they know that what is happening to them is wrong, but they still manage to go about it. And actually, some of them are very resilient. The village ladies, some of them are very resilient. But basically, what he should have used here was lack of knowledge. The wording should have been used. But he's not wrong when it comes to low education level. Your education does play a role in what will happen. Then next we have wrong interpretations of religious, traditional, and cultural norms of the society. Now, because where we are in Pakistan, when we talk in culturally, and by culture, I'm not just talking about Pakistan, I'm talking about Punjab, Sindh, Balochistan, KP, and GB, and all this. Like periphery, the periphery cultures. Most of it is patriarchal, like superiority of the men, like that, superiority of the men, and like they should be the head of the family and all that, like male centric and all that. So which causes self entitlement amongst the upholders, causes a self entitlement, like okay, I'm the patriarch, as I get to decide what happens at family matters and all that. And causes self-entitlement amongst the upholders. Why I use the word upholders? Because it's not just, when we talk of patriarch, it's not just men upholding it, but also I have seen some women also upholding this. And sometimes it's just like that, if a woman wants to go out, you can convince the father to let you go out and all that, but sometimes your mom who has little exposure of the outside world, they will not allow you to go out and just like if you want to pursue higher education, get a job or anything and all that. Like they internalize the misogyny or like the patriarchal values unconsciously, and unconsciously it happens. When we have biases, sometimes we have biases which we even ourselves don't know. So and all that. So when we talk of because we have our mindset that way, like patriarchals, and so when we think of traditions and cultural norms, we look at from that, it is like that. So if so that's why you have sometimes these double standards, like if a guy does this or that, it's totally normal, but if a woman does that or whatever, is like what is this? Problematic, start to like all that. So when we bring in religion as well, like religion, I'm not a very religious person, by the way, but like when we bring in religion, sometime when the interpretation of the Quran or the Hadiths happen, so because we have this biases exist from a patriarchal lens. So yeah, Islamic traditions and all these stuff are also affected by it. Like I will explain at the next point. One example. Dowry system. We have dowry system Dowry is basically amount of property or money brought by a bride to her husband on the marriage. So as I again told you, economics also play a role in domestic violence. So if a bride, for example, brings very little amount or something, the guy, the husband may be oh, you have brought this dowry or something. And sometimes dowry isn't paid on time. Dowry
turns into a social stigma.
it becomes a social stigma and all that.
It's not just husband, there's many in-laws.
Yes, as in-laws and all that. And actually, sometimes over dowry issues, marriage proposals get rejected, even in dowry system.
In fact, if some marriage has already taken place, it may end up in a divorce.
Yes, exactly.
Close to that extreme.
Sometimes dowry issues end up in divorce, and divorce is very frowned upon here. Actually, culturally is
But again,
culturally from
social stigma.
it's still stigmatized and all stigma and all that. Exactly. Thank you. Next, okay. Now, after that we have women's suppressed autonomy. We already discussed the suppressed autonomy, and then male's addiction to alcohol. One of the causes. Okay, yes, we may be an Islamic republic, but even in newspapers and if you go to hospitals, you still get alcohol poisoning cases. So don't be surprised. Why am I laughing on this? Anyways. Next point, prevailing systems of parda and izzat are misused to push the social isolation of women. Now, parda, we may consider it coming from Islamic tradition, but basically Islam doesn't say anything regarding that. Actually, they don't even say women should cover their faces and all. No, it doesn't exist. And actually, women used to interact with the Prophet face to face, no curtain or anything. Basically, this parda, which is basically covering of and a social isolation of women. And even if they had to go through, navigate around, there were these shuttlecock burqas or niqabs or whatever, whichever cover the face. Basically, this is from the it's a subcontinent thing, not a Islamic thing. It's a subcontinent thing, cultural thing. It's a cultural thing. It's from. Like you see in Rajputs, you will see them. Not Rajput is one example. There are many others. So basically, the brother system is supposed to be back in those days when wars used to be very common. So unfortunately, back then. Women were pretty much treated as possessions, and actually objectification of women. They were treated as possession, and actually, I remember I was told regarding the Rajputs that before they go to a battle, they will kill all the women and children before going to a battlefield, and. If they get killed, they get killed, and if they come back, and all. So and all that. And actually, sometimes when the invading armies will come, the women will commit self-immolation. Before being instead of getting caught, they will a mass suicide will whatever all that. So.
Basically, the same idea of that they are the objects.
Yes, exactly. It's yes.
And they didn't want their possession to fall into other men's hands.
Exactly.
They will either kill them,
Yes.
or the women who are, have integrated this patriarchal code in their,
in their mind.
heads. Yeah, so
They
they
will
will go for a mass suicide or something of the sort.
Exactly.
But in today's world, you can say that In today's world, you could say the heads are bare and the faces are covered.
Actually, it's much more than that. Anyway, okay, I shouldn't be look. Okay, so this is like you see how they are misused to push the social isolation.
Basically, in our society, we have made an amalgamation of culture, religion.
Yes, yes, we blur the boundaries
yeah,
between.
we have blurred the boundaries. So anything cultural can be termed as religious and so on and so forth, and then we have made a lethal combination for us.
Yes, yes.
It also depends on the class and classifications. Middle and lower, they need to be covered because they should not come in the mainstream or the public should be. But at the upper level, they are intellectually strong. That's why they could roam around and they could talk and they have the confidence and how to talk with the opposites. That's why this is the difference between.
Yes, yes, but you see that how it is misused, And then when it comes to Izzat, basically Izzat is basically Urdu for respect, like you show respect to your elders, to others and all that. Frankly speaking, even despite the numerous research I have done preparing this topic, even I don't understand this. Basically we are talking about respect, but here in this context we are talking about reputation, family reputation and all that.
I would like to add that instead of izzat, it is more of a ghairat ka concept.
Yes, a ghairat ka concept.
As they don't have a
English word for it.
ghairat, so therefore they use this. For example,
honor
killings are basically in the name of ghairat, not
yes,
izzat. Izzat is something different from ghairat.
But then even.
But then it is very difficult to explain what ghairat precisely means.
Exactly.
Yes,
yes, it varies track to track, and actually, sometimes it doesn't make much sense associating reputation to one's. Anyways, next we have other prominent points with domestic violence in the Pakistani culture are societal pressures, imbalance of power between men and women. As we have already discussed before, that because of the patriarchal system, and I'm not just talking about men specifically, even women also uphold these patriarchal values. So this causes I would say by default it causes an imbalance of power between men and women. And as the audience pointed out, that when you have societal pressures are created, like okay, if some domestic happen in a household, when they complain, the in-laws will just say, "Oh, just bear with it," or there's something with the not the in-laws, but the parents themselves are like, just bear with the abuse, all that. No need to seek abuse. I mean, divorce. Like, what would people say? What would people say? Like, low-key aap bolenge. If they use, because divorce is actually very stigmatized here. Like legally you can seek it, but it's very frowned upon here. So it's like, again, reputation and all that. It's like societal pressures come into play and all that. So that's the causes of domestic violence in Pakistan context. I'm not sure if I explained well. Next slide, please. Impact of domestic violence. So domestic violence has a profound effect on the affected parties in many ways. Here we will discuss the impact of domestic violence on the following also parties: women, children, elderly, men, and transgenders. I try to be as inclusive as possible. Next slide, please. So we've started off with women. Next, effects of domestic violence on women. This is from ACT government. Domestic and family violence has short and long-term physical, emotional, psychological, financial, and other effects on women. Every woman is different, and individual and cumulative impact of each and of the act of violence depends on many complex factors. While each woman will experience family and domestic violence uniquely, there are many common effects of living with violence and living in fear. The obvious physical effects of domestic family violence of women are physical injury and death too. Yes, in Pakistan you have that too. Yet there are also other effects on women's physical health, such as insomnia, basically staying up the whole night, chronic pain, like having long, feeling pain for too long, or repeatedly, physical exhaustion, and reproductive health problems that are not necessarily the result of physical injuries. It can be also result from emotional and others. Women experiencing domestic and family violence have high rates of miscarriages, most probably because pregnancy is often a time when violence begins or is exacerbated. Women experiencing domestic and family violence are more likely to experience depression, panic attacks, phobias, anxiety, and sleeping disorders. They are higher stress levels and are at greater risk of suicide attempts. They are at an increased risk of misusing alcohol and other drugs and of using minor tranquilizers and painkillers, just to divert the attention away from all the misery, just resort to these tranquilizers, painkillers, and all these substances. And yes. Next, please. Women who experience domestic and family violence are often unable to act on their own choices because of physical restraint, fear, and intimidation. They often live in persistent fear of further violation. They are frequently silenced and unable to express their point of view or experience. Women often make their partner's needs, feelings the constant focus of their attention as a survival strategy, in order to survive, which may result in inability to attend to their own and their children's health and well-being. They're so focused on okay, how am I supposed to avoid this violence to occur? That sometimes they can't take care of themselves, and can take care of their children's health and well-being. And actually, when you can't take care of yourself, then it has effect. You're not able to help your children and all that. Sometimes you have to self-care before helping caring for others. Self-care. Women who experience domestic and family violence often experience social isolation, including from their own extended family. Isolation can be a form of a controlling behavior or a consequence of women's stress, anxiety, shame, physical exhaustion, substance abuse, physical injuries, and fear. Seeing the effects of violence on their children can be profoundly distressing for women. Some women, they may feel bad, children have to witness this, all that. So it affects them as well. They may feel or be unable to protect the children. This can have serious effects on their identity and confidence as mothers. Women's capacities to parent their children can be affected by physical, emotional, and cognitive effects of their own experience of the violence and by men's deliberate attempts to undermine their confidence and abilities as mothers. So when domestic violence happens, sometimes, I'm not sure about motherhood. My mom knows better. But sometimes there comes a time when you do question, am I being a good mom? Am I taking good care of my kids? Am I a good parent? And all that. Sometimes you have this, there comes this phase when you question your abilities. But in domestic violence, it gets further. You have abilities and confidence becomes questionable. You begin questioning because of the domestic violence. Next slide.
Here I will like to add something. That many women say, oh, they are not opting out of the marriage or are opting for a divorce just because of their kids.
Yes, what will happen to their kids?
Yeah, what will happen to their kids or something. And then the question comes back to, okay, is it okay to live in an abusive relationship where children happen to witness this?
Yes.
One, the question will become, is it okay to let the children in that abusive environment or to opt out?
Yes.
But again, it is because of the social stigma that...
Yes. Okay, now, yes, do you have any?
Actually, we can't come out of the such kind of mishappiness, but we can set the lines. We will not on face of children's make some abusing or calling the names of this and that, I could say.
Well, we will look into that. Now I have discussed about women, now I'm moving to children. We don't take the children very serious. Even we don't often take children very serious, but I think we should look at from their perspective as well. The effects of domestic violence on children. Younger children may become anxious. They may complain of tummy aches or start to wet the bed. They find it difficult to sleep, have tantrums, and start to behave as they have much younger than they are. Regress. They may also find it difficult to separate from the abused parents when they start nursery or school. For that first paragraph, I will give because the younger children, they can't they are witnessing domestic violence, all that, but they can't seem to comprehend what's going on. Why is this happening? Mom is crying and all that. Mom is crying, dad is crying. I mean, it works. The whole house is chaotic, and all that. They can't seem to express themselves. They are not. So that's how they express that there's something distressing at home. And what they mean by they find it difficult to separate from their abused parents when they start nursery or school. The children may be okay if I go to school. What will happen to mom? What will happen to dad? Something like that. Like when they are away. So they get anxious. Older children react differently. Boys seem to express their distress much more outwardly, for example, by becoming aggressive and disobedient. Sometimes they start to use violence to try and solve problems. They may copy the behavior they see within the family. Older boys may play truant and start to use alcohol or drugs, both of which are common way of trying to block out disturbing experiences and memories. Girls are more likely to keep their distress inside. They may become withdrawn from other people and become anxious or depressed. They may think badly of themselves and complain of vague physical symptoms. They are more likely to have an eating disorder or to harm themselves by taking overdoses or cutting themselves. They are also more likely to choose an abusive partner themselves. Basically, when they see abusive abuse happen, normally, okay, for now as I say, domestic violence work, many people are affected by it, but let's stick with what we have an image, a man beating a woman. For now, let's imagine. So basically, a guy will think, the boy who's watching his father beat his mom will think that it's acceptable, it's normal for a guy to beat up the mom or to meet any female and all that. So they will aim, so all that, they think it's okay to abuse them and all that, which we all know that's fully wrong, but it's what they witnessed. While for the girls, when they witness their mom getting beaten up by their dad and all that, they may think that that's how it is. It is okay, it's normal for a woman to get beaten up and all that. It's normal. So when they get, for them it is acceptable. So when they enter into relationships, get married or start dating and all that, if the partner starts abusing them, they just accept it. They just take it as normal, is expected, which otherwise it is wrong. Desensitization, yes. Children of any age can develop symptoms of what is called post-traumatic stress disorder. It's the same issues soldiers face when they come back from a war zone. They may get nightmares, flashbacks, become very jumpy, and have headaches and physical pains. Children dealing with domestic violence and abuse often do badly at school. Their fighting experience at home make it difficult to concentrate in school, and if they are worried about the abused parent, they may refuse to go to school. So basically, when some may perform badly in school because when there is a whole commotion happening at home, and they are witnessing all that, so they don't concentrate on the studies. Okay, there's this abuse, this is something going on at home, something has to be done. So then they don't concentrate much on the studies and all that, and sometimes children, and it's not just children, overall we humans, even when we are in different situations, we are at school, we are at work, we sometimes think about what's going on at home. We do think all that. So when they go to school, when we see school children, they may seem normal to us, but if we sometimes if we go through their thoughts, then they may not find it. They may find it difficult to concentrate the lessons or school, like what's going on in school lessons and all that, because they're like, I mean, they're like, okay, this is what's happening at home and all that. Like their concentration is not there, not on what the teacher is telling you. And then, and if they're worried about the abused parents, they may refuse to go to school. Like if the situation is bad enough, they may not come to school because they don't know. I mean, uncertainty. Like if they are aware what will happen to the parent. Next. As adults, children who have witnessed violence and abuse are more likely to become involved in a violent or abusive relationship themselves. Not all children end up that way, but the likelihood of this there's a likelihood of it happening. Children tend to copy the behavior of their parents. That's I mean, that's what we are parents are role models for their. We just discussed it. Actually, parents do play as a role model to their children, especially in the formative years. So they copy the behavior of the parents. Boys learn from their fathers to be violent to women. Girls learn from their mothers that violence is to be expected and something you just have to put up with. We already discussed this. However, children don't always repeat the same pattern. And when they grow up, many children don't like what they see and try very hard not to make the same mistakes as their parents. Even so, children from violent, abusive families may grow up feeling anxious and depressed and find it difficult to get on. Each child is different. Each child is different. Some will, after witnessing such event, may say like, no, when we become parents, when we grow up, when we become parents ourselves, we don't want our children or to go through that, or we don't want our husband or wife to go through that. So they will try to prevent it, like prevent it. But yet they get anxious, they get depressed because when they still recall like what they have witnessed in childhood. So like they still suffer and they have difficulty getting on with other people. This is from the Royal College of Pediatrics. Next. Yes, it's misogyny. Effects of domestic violence on elders. Now, as elders also suffer from domestic violence, despite their seen, I mean, here in our culture, elders are highly respected and all that, esteemed, respected. Sometimes to the point of no questioning. You can't question your elders. But even they also suffer. But in some other cultures, and maybe even in Pakistan as well, elders also face abuse. So the effects of domestic violence on elders include health effects. Abuse has significant impact on people at any age, but older adults can be especially vulnerable. In general, older adults have less physical strength and less physical resilience than younger persons. Some older adults may be frail or already have disabilities or impairments that leave them particularly vulnerable. Older people bones break more easily and take longer to heal. Any injury or accumulation of injuries over time can lead to serious harm or death. For example, physical abuse may result in a hip fracture. Now, the older people, yes, older people. I mean, there comes a time when you can no longer fight back. There comes a time when you can no longer keep up. Like, basically, like, if something is bad is happening to you, you can still resist and all that. But there comes a point where you can't do that. It comes with old age. So, so when they get subjected to physical abuse, because they can't fight back because they are past that age. So they end up getting injured, and some serious injuries occur, and sometimes they get killed. Sometimes. Many older adults experiencing abuse and neglect are isolated. Individuals who abuse and neglect older adults often threaten, harass, or imitate them. For example, certain abusers threaten to not let older adults see their grandchildren. Happens. Older others may prevent older adults from having visitors or may threaten to leave them alone, like abandonment. As a result of abuse or neglect, older adults often experience worry, depression, or anxiety. These signs may be mistaken for memory loss or illness when really they are effects of stress or worry. Also, older adults may also feel shame, guilt, or embarrassment that someone in the family or someone close has harmed them. Because, as we mentioned before, that older adults are like highly esteemed, like to the point of no questioning, like questioning. So, if they like talk out, like we are being abused, as we are also being abused. So, like the society may like, but you're the eldest in your family. How can don't they have your children? Why haven't you taught your children this or that? Don't they know like that they have to show respect to your elders, and like do they have any regards for like all the talks, gossip? And not all of us like to be a subject of a gossip. I mean, we like gossiping, but we don't like to be a subject of a gossip. You know that. And worry, depression, anxiety. When you are retired, basically you don't have a lot of work, so you just sit on the sofa. Sometimes you just sit on the sofa, sit on a chair or something, and just think, and sometimes overthink. So when you are experiencing all that, so they may experience very depression, anxiety. Like, okay, what will happen tomorrow? Will this happen to me tomorrow? Will that, if not to this, what will happen tomorrow? Like uncertainty, and all that. Some abused older adults may start to eat less, use more medication, or drink more alcohol to help cope with the emotional and physical health. They may have difficulty sleeping or sleep too much. Some abused or neglected older adults may lose interest in life or become withdrawn. Some may have suicidal thoughts. Some may have suicidal thoughts like, okay, we are old enough, we will die anyways, so it's better just to. I mean, I don't intend to. I don't want to ridicule them. No. That's not my intention. But like, some like it's better to die than living this misery old age. Next slide, please. Financial effects. In Pakistan, you will see that very often, especially. Financial abuse can have negative impact on the adults' health and well-being. Many older adults who experience financial abuse also face emotional abuse. Financial abuse can lead to ongoing distress and financial strain in the older person's life. Stolen or forced income checks can leave a low-income senior without money for food, medication, and transportation. Financial abuse may involve loss of home through deceit, loss of beloved personal assets through theft, or loss of money from improper use of power of attorney. When abusers steal or control other adults' money or other property, older adults may have fewer resources to take care of their own health, housing, nutrition. Some children of these older adults, they like say to their elders like, okay, I will do this. I will do this investment, so give me money for that. Okay, I want to do this, I will give me money for that, and like, or okay, or use forge income checks, like, okay, taking money from the account and all that. Like, as I already discussed, like, economics also play a role. So like misuse of all that. At the end, these older age people, they end up with little to nothing to take care of themselves. Next slide. Social effects. The effects of abuse and neglect can carry from generation to generation. For example, grandchildren who witness such abuse may come to view negative behaviors towards older people as acceptable and perpetrate disrespect. Abuse and neglect of older adults is not a private matter. It affects individuals, families, and communities, and ultimately society at large. So basically, when older elders get abused, so grandchildren, they watch the parents. I mean, as we've discussed before, their parents are the role models. So when they see that the parents, they treat their parents with like abuse, neglect, manipulation, and all that. So the grandchildren will think like, okay, this is how we treat our. Okay, it's acceptable to treat our elders that way, and then they will also start to do so. Also start to do so. So then, it's a trickle down effect. So that's it for elders. Next. Okay. We often stereotype. I mean, we already discussed before that when we think of domestic violence, our picture is like a man beating a woman, which is very much there, all that. But as the United Nations have defined it, domestic abuse can happen to anyone, regardless of gender as well. It doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman; it can happen to anyone. So I want to bring this up: domestic effects of domestic violence on men, like patriarchy. The men also suffer from patriarchy. They also suffer from this domestic violence. So, let's see what we have here. Psychological and mental effects include men who are subjected to domestic violence suffer a lot psychologically. They tend to underestimate themselves and blame themselves for all the wrong that has happened to them. Because they're raised to be care providers. In the patriarchal system, they are raised to be the care providers, like provide funds and all that. So if something is wrong in the household, being the head of the family, so if anything goes wrong in the household, so then like, oh, what have we done? What wrong did we commit and all that, So they began blaming themselves for all the wrong and underestimate themselves. Men suffering from violence in the domestic relationship tends to suffer from anxiety and depression. They're not able to adjust themselves to the societal norm of being the alpha male, like how the men are supposed to be. In the domestic setup, and thus develop various mental ailments. Like they are not conforming to the societal expectation of a man. So anxiety and depression. And then they develop the societal tendencies to continuous harassment and violence. Like they also suffer from suicidal, just like women also have suicidal thoughts regarding when it comes to domestic violence, so they do when they are the receiving end. So this is from psychological effect. Next, physical sufferings. Whenever the term domestic violence comes into mind, one generally pictures females being trashed and assaulted physically, but males too are equally likely to suffer such abuse. As mentioned. Some of the physical injuries that can occur include cuts, bruises, bites, marks, concussions, broken bones, penetrative injuries such as knife wounds, joint damage, loss of hearing, vision, migraines, permanent disfigurement, etc. Next slide. Suffering socially. This is actually the author Shoni Kapoor. He was writing it from writing it from New Delhi, but I believe this also applies in our side of the board, heretical flying. That men who have been domestically abused are subjected to violence, suffer social discrimination, are looked down upon. Like, I mean, because we are a patriarchal society, there's like. If a guy who's suffering says, "I'm being abused by my wife" or something, the first response will be include like, "But you're a guy. Why can't you fight back?" Or like, "Oh, why are you being? Why are you just ranting about this? Is normal." Like all that. So like they get looked down upon, like he can't even stand up against his own wife. Men are often socialized to think themselves not as victims and accept things as it is, which in turn can be very detrimental to their well-being. Society does not easily believe that men can be subjected to domestic abuse and often joke about the serious issue. because we already been taught that we are not. It's not wrong. I mean, when we think of domestic violence, we think of first and foremost we think about women. So picturing a guy being a victim of domestic violence is a bit hard to imagine for many people, especially lay people. It's very hard. So it's not that. So if they say that, if a guy says like I'm also suffering from domestic abuse, so they have a hard time believing it. Like, okay, you can all guys can also suffer from domestic abuse. And then abuse at home affects one's ability to face a society and also develops a fear of being stigmatized at the hands of the general public. Like what we have seen. Next slide. Financial suffering. Domestic violence results in less productivity of an individual, in turn affects his employment and capacity to work. As I already discussed in the children's slides, that we as humans, no matter where we go, we think about what's going on in our home, or like when we come back home, what we think about what's going on in work and all. So when the guy comes to work, he is too focused, like what will happen when I come back home? Will my wife, will my partner abuse me, or what will he or she do next, and all that. So then it affects the productivity at work, like not focusing on concentrating at work, and then it affects his employment and capacity to work. Like when you have little, employers will say like, oh, you're not concentrating on your work. I am very sorry, but I will have to dismiss you. And then they will, like, employment is affected. And abusers often tend to exploit the victim financially and drain his resources. There's a common joke around here that guys are ATM machines. You just take money from them. I mean, you can laugh about it. It's up to you if you want to laugh about it. Indulging in litigation or fighting for the rights can be an expensive deal for male victims because lack of institutions and organizations to support them. Because most of our domestic helplines are very focused on women. Because again, when we think of domestic violence, most of the time women suffer from domestic violence. So it'll be hard to for them to file a lawsuit because there won't be any much organization to support them. Support them. Next. And yes, okay, to maintain honesty, I should be very honest. Yes, I took this from ChatGPT. I asked ChatGPT to generate this for me. Actually, I couldn't find much information out there in the internet regarding transgender, so I had to ask her. So if any inaccuracy occurs, I offer my sincerest apologies in advance. Okay, effects of domestic violence on transgenders. Transgender people, they also suffer from domestic violence. We may not see it, but we shouldn't ignore the fact. They ignore that fact. So effects include physical and emotional harm. Transgender individuals who experience domestic violence may suffer physical injuries such as bruises, broken bones, as well as emotional trauma such as anxiety and depression. Isolation. Transgender individuals may be isolated from the support networks due to discrimination, social stigma, leaving them more vulnerable to domestic violence. Housing instability. Domestic violence may result in homelessness or unstable housing situations, which can be particularly dangerous for transgender individuals who may face discrimination, violence in homeless shelters or other communal situations. Financial insecurity. Transgender individuals who experience domestic violence may face financial abuse, such as being prevented from accessing employment or financial resources. Health issues. Transgender individuals who experience domestic violence may suffer from a range of health issues, including HIV, sexually transmitted infections, and substance abuse. So, as far as housing onwards is concerned, housing instability, so like transgenders, they end up being homeless before being picked up by a guru, they end up homeless. So when you're in a homeless situation, so you're vulnerable to. I mean, you're placed in a very hostile. I mean, not hostile, very dangerous environment around you in the streets. Like you never know, somebody will mistreat you or whatever, and all that. And even if they get into a shelter, like a communal living situation, like into a homeless shelter, they may still face discrimination. Like some homeless shelters, they're like, "Oh, we are just women, we are just for women, we are just for guys." So and actually in Pakistan, the transgender don't have not much facilities are out there for them. So it will be difficult for them to look for shelters.
Even in hospitals, this happens.
Yes.
Doctors don't know if they need to place the
them in
patient in a male ward or a female ward.
Exactly.
And I remember an incident in Peshawar where a transgender was brought with a bullet injury.
Yes.
And they almost debated for a whole 1 hour where to place the patient, and in the meantime the patient lost so lot of blood that they passed away.
Yes. So that's housing instability, financial security.
Transgenders have way more difficult than women, men, or rest of the society.
Yes. When it comes to financial security, they already have little to no income. Whatever income they get is taken away from them. Such as, and then again, as pointed out, like it's very difficult for them to get employment. There's a lot of discrimination. Actually, there are still campaigns here to get them employed to professions.
In fact, it is a very recent thing that they have got the right to have their own ID cards with their assigned gender.
Yes.
Otherwise, they won't have ID cards, and there is no employment without an ID card. Yeah, they suffered a lot.
Yes.
It's a very, very recent.
Or any financial resource. And then health issues. Transgender individuals who experience domestic violence may suffer from a range of health issues. Yes, so basically in this health issues, as my mom pointed out, that we are not sure to put them in the female ward or put them in the male ward, and then debate for hours what to do, and then sometimes they just pass away from neglect. And when it comes to these, not all prostitutes work in the in this adult, this sexual industry, sex work industries, but most of them, not all of them, but a lot of them do. So because prostitution is a means of generating income, as society may look down upon it, but they are pushed to do so. So with all these stuff, you get it comes with like HIV and all these stuff comes with the work, the nature of the work, and all that. So that's health issues and all. Next slide. And transgender individuals may also face additional issues in seeking help for domestic violence, such as lack of awareness and understanding. Many service providers may not be aware of the unique experience and needs of transgender individuals, which can result in a lack of appropriate service and support. Discrimination. Transgender individuals may face discrimination from service providers, law enforcement, and others, which can make it more difficult to seek help and access services. Fears of outing. Transgender individuals may be hesitant to seek help from domestic violence out of fear of being outed or experiencing further discrimination. Limited access to healthcare. Transgender individuals may face barriers to accessing healthcare, including mental health care, which can make it difficult to address the physical and emotional effects of domestic violence. Lack of legal protections. Transgender individuals may face discrimination in the legal system, including a lack of legal protections for gender identity and sexual orientation. Give me 5 minutes, please. Okay. Now my yes. lack of awareness and understanding. Now, when we actually, even on the internet, if you go, there's still a lot of debates when it comes to transgenders. There's still a lot of debates. Actually, when you talk about transgenders, it's a whole different world you're talking about. So it's difficult for males and females about it. And actually, another thing is because ID card, as it is difficult to issue them ID cards. Actually, Nadra has started issuing gender X cards, but even there it is a struggle. But without an ID card or without a BAE form, you can't you can't go to a school and all that. Go to school and all that, so they're not exactly aware of what to do or like what services are there, and the service providers are not able to help because they are like woman-centric, men-centric, so they are not sure how to cater to the transgender community, and their needs are very different from what women needs and men needs. It's totally different. And then discrimination, we already discriminate them as a society. We already discriminate them. So, service providers, law enforcement, and others are not exception. They are not. I mean, they are also part of it. I mean, after all, they are also part of the society. So they also discriminate, which makes it difficult to seek help and access service. Like if a transgender has a report domestic violence to the police will just
lodge an FIR.
they won't take the case very seriously. Or just or even like we write the FIR and then put it in the archives, never to be seen again. Complications and all that. Then fear of outing. Transgender individuals, so they may be hesitant to seek help from domestic violence out of fear of being outed or experience further discrimination. Like as mentioned before, like they fear that if they talk about domestic violence and all that, so they may be kicked out of their shelter, and then again being placed in a dangerous environment out there in the streets. And then limited access to healthcare, as pointed out. Accessing healthcare is a problem. Like I recently went to pay a visit to PIMS hospital, and they actually ask you now these days they ask you for a CNIC card when they issue these patient slips. Now, because not all the transgender people have ID cards, because it's difficult to register them. So without a ID card, you can't get a patient slip. Without a patient slip, you can't get a healthcare. So it's difficult for them, and which makes it difficult to address physical and emotional effects of domestic violence. Because and even if they do manage to get access to healthcare, as their experience with domestic violence is very unique, not like what you hear from women or from guys. So it'll be difficult for the therapist to like what to do about it. And then lack of legal protection. Even in policy making, there are a lot of discrimination against the transgenders. Actually, we had a transgender protection bill, which the federal Sharia court was regarding as far as gender identities are concerned, called it un-Islamic. So, like even in policy making, you had discrimination against transgender persons, and again, and then like gender identity and sexual orientation. Like there's here we have a clash of these in the policy making tables. Next. Now, what can one do about it? What can we do? There are some ways to support someone who has been abused. Listen to the person, believe them. honor where they are in the process and don't push your personal views. Offer assistance and let them know that they are not alone. Help them note down all the details they can remember. Remind them that they are not to blame for anything that has happened to them. Encourage them to seek professional support either through a confidential hotline or via or other medical or mental health care providers. Encourage them to speak up about abuse and report the abuser to the authorities because keeping it secret only protects the abuser. Respect whatever their choice they make and let them know that you'll be there for them regardless of what they do. I know this is a bit too idealistic, given our country, this is a bit too idealistic, but who knows, a small step, whatever you can do, your best, maybe can help. As much as it's better, it's better to offer a little help than offering no help at all, and all that. So next slide. And where to get help? There are organizations out there there to help. Hey, if you know someone, if you or someone you know is a victim of domestic violence in Pakistan, there are several helplines available that can provide assistance and support. Here are a few helplines you can contact the National Commission on the Status of Women helpline. This government body works to promote and protect the rights of women in Pakistan. They have a helpline that provides assistance to women who are victims of violence. You can call them at this. It's all highlighted. It's toll-free number. It's all out there. Then you have Madadgar helpline. Madadgar is an NGO that provides legal aid and assistance to victims of violence in Pakistan. They have a helpline that provides support to the victims of domestic violence. You can call their helpline there. You have also Rosen helpline. I have been to Rosen. They are very active organization. Rosen is an organization that works to promote gender equality to prevent violence against women and children. They have a helpline that provides counseling and support to victims of domestic violence. Then you have Blue Veins helpline. Blue Veins is an organization that works to provide the rights of women and children in Pakistan. They can help. They have a helpline that provides assistance to women who are victims of violence, and you can call them. It's important to remember that domestic violence is a serious issue can have serious consequences. If you or someone you know is a victim of domestic violence, please seek help immediately. We encourage you to do it immediately, but given the Pakistan situation, it may be difficult, but you can put your best out there. Next.
Foundation is also toll-free, I think.
It is toll-free. It's a 08. Any number starting with any number which has 0800 is at the starting, that's toll-free numbers. Like you won't be charged if you dial the number. It's free of cost number. Okay. Now, where to get help for men? Like as I mentioned, women-centric. So like for men, we have White Ribbon Pakistan. White Ribbon is a non-profit organization that works to prevent domestic violence by engaging men and boys and promoting gender equality and respectful relationship. They offer a helpline that provides counseling and support for men who are experiencing domestic violence. You can call them on this number. Then we have Darul Aman. Darul Aman is a government-run shelter that provides temporary housing and support service for men and women who are experiencing domestic violence. They have several locations throughout Pakistan, and they can be reached through the local police station or by calling the police helpline 15. It'll be a struggle with the police, but it's still better to take a step than doing not at all. HRCP, we all know the Human Rights Commission of Pakistan. Their own chairman has come here in the black hole time to time. So they work to promote human rights in Pakistan. They offer legal and advocacy service for men who are experiencing domestic violence. You can reach them at this number. And then the National Commission on the Status of Women, NCW, is a government body that works to promote gender equality to protect the rights of women and girls in Pakistan. They offer legal and advocacy service for men who are experiencing domestic violence. You can reach them at this number as well. It's important to seek help if you're experiencing domestic violence. These helplines and centers can provide support, resources, and counseling to help men who are experiencing domestic violence. It's important to remember that domestic violence can happen to anyone regardless of gender, and seeking help is an important step towards healing and safety. Next slide. Where to get help for transgenders? There are also NGO organizations for them as well. So we have Trans Action Pakistan, is a non-profit organization that works to promote rights of transgender individuals in Pakistan. They offer a helpline that provides support and counseling for transgender individuals who are experiencing domestic violence. You can call them at this number. Kashyap Foundation is a microfinance organization, provides financial service to women and transgender individuals in Pakistan. They offer a helpline that provides counseling support for transgender individuals who are experiencing domestic violence. The numbers there. War Against Rape. War is a non-profit organization that provides legal and psychological support to survivors of sexual and domestic violence in Pakistan. They offer a helpline that provides counseling support for transgender individuals who are experiencing domestic violence. You can reach them with this number. And then Rosen again, as discussed before, they also provide counseling and support for transgender individuals who are experiencing domestic violence. It's important to seek. Yes. It's counseling to help transgender. Next. Next. Where to get help from abusers? As still being optimistic, as I'm a bit too idealistic here, but I still believe that they can be abusers can seek help. So we have Rehab International, is a private rehabilitation center that provides counseling treatment for individuals struggling with addiction and abusive behavior. Umeed No is a rehabilitation center that provides counseling therapy for individuals struggling with substance abuse and domestic violence. At the White Ribbon Pakistan, I just mentioned it before, they work with men and boys to promote gender equality and respect for relationships. They provide counseling on that too. At Talash Association is an organization that provides counseling support for individuals struggling with domestic violence and abuse. It is important to know that seeking help for abusive behavior is difficult but necessary step towards healing and ending the cycle of new violence. These helplines can provide confidential support and resources to help you understand your behavior, take steps towards change. I know I'm being idealistic, but who knows? There might be just cross our fingers, and maybe there are people out there seeking. So we conclude this. Through this presentation, we have understood what is domestic violence, why it happens, how are people affected by it, signs of it, what can one do about it, where to seek help. I am already tired of talking. Anyways, I conclude my presentation with a thank you. Thank you for bearing with me with this long presentation. And I hope I did okay. And we may start the Q&A session. Any questions? Comments?
Wonderfully done, well knitted. I admire all your effort. अच्छा, इसमें थोड़ा सा मैं भी तबसरा भी करना चाहूँगा कि डोमेस्टिक वायलेंस जो है उसको रिपोर्ट कैसे किया जाए, क्योंकि मैंने जो किताब लिखी है उसमें जो 6 नंबर चैप्टर है बहुत वास्टली और वाइडली मैंने डोमेस्टिक वायलेंस को मुख्तलिफ कॉजेज़, फैक्टर्स और करेक्टिव मेजर्स के साथ जो है ना वो पब्लिक के सामने लाया है. मैं खुद चूँकि एक पूरा अशरा जो है वो होम ट्यूशन्स वगैरह पढ़ाई हैं मिडल और लोअर में ना, वहाँ बहुत ज़्यादा वायलेंस मैंने बच्चों पर होते देखा है. तो 2 चीज़ों के नताइज पर मैं पहुँचा हूँ कि एक तो यह है कि जो मिडल और लोअर है खाली और जहन, इवन पेरेंट्स भी हैं और क्राउडेड फैमिलीज़ हैं और इकॉनमी की जो डिस्पैरिटी है वो एक मेन रीज़न है. यानी एक तरफ ज़्यादा तादाद में बच्चे और बच्चियों का होना और दूसरी तरफ इकनॉमिक जो प्रेशर है दे आर अनएबल टू मीट इट आउट, और यही एक मेन रीज़न जो है वो बन रही होती है. लेकिन उनके यहाँ जो डोमेस्टिक वायलेंस है उसकी रिपोर्टिंग नहीं होती. अब रिपोर्टिंग के लिए या तो सिलेबसिस के अंदर कुछ चीज़ें लाई जाएँ जिसमें बच्चों को एजुकेट किया जाए, सेंसिटाइज़ किया जाए, उनको थोड़ा सा एनकरेज किया जाए कि अगर आप रिपोर्ट करते हैं बाय सेकंड सोर्स, बाय योर क्लास फेलोज, बाय योर नेबर, तो फिर उसमें यह है कि लॉ इन्फोर्सिंग एजेंसीज. फिर इसके अलावा ये है कि फोरम्स की बहुत ही ज़्यादा अहमियत है. चले NGOs तो نیشنل اور انٹرنیشنل لیول پر کام کر رہی ہوتی ہیں. لیکن فورمز اراؤنڈ جو ہے نا ان کا ہونا, پھر جو اس کے لیے وکلاء کا گروپ یا پینل ہونا جن کو اپروچ کیا جائے, پھر کورٹس کے اندر رٹ کی جائے, قوانین موجود ہوتے ہیں, ہر چیز کے لیے قانون موجود ہے. یہ آج کی بات نہیں ہے, یہ 19ویں صدی سے جو ہے جہاں بھی برٹش امپائر رہے ہیں قوانین انہوں نے بنا دیے ہیں. لیکن سوسائٹی کے اندر ویلیوز یا کریج نہیں بیس ہوتی, یا سپورٹنگ سسٹم جو اسٹیٹ بیس پر ہے وہ نہیں ہوتا. ہمارے جو پبلک ریپرزنٹیٹیوز ہوتے ہیں وہ اس کو جو ہے وہ پک اپ نہیں کرتے. یہاں تک کہ ہمارے پاکستان کے اندر جو جرگہ سسٹم ہے وہ اتنا اسٹرانگ ہے کہ اس کے اوپر بھی مطلب اسٹیٹ کی یا جو کورٹس کی ریٹ ہے وہ نہیں ہوتی. ان کے فیصلے جو ہے وہ عرف آخر کے طور پر لیے جاتے ہیں. اور یہ ایک واحد ایسی چیز ہے جس کو پبلک ریپرزنٹیٹیو بھی نہیں اٹھا رہا. کہتا ہے ایک بندہ سفر کرتا ہے, ایک ووٹ ہے, جبکہ وہ سکتا ہے پوری برادری یا بہت سے ووٹس میرے جانے کا جو ہے وہ ایک بحث بن سکتا ہے. یہ تو ہو گیا کہ چلیں جو مڈل اور لوئر میں ہے وہاں پریکٹس ہے, جنرل پریکٹس. میں نے خود مطلب پڑھاتے ہوئے دیکھا ہے, ماں باپ شروع ہو گیا آپس میں اور بچے افیکٹ ہو رہے ہیں, اور بچے جو کہ ایجوکیشن حاصل کر رہے ہیں وہ انتہائی سینسٹیو ہیں. اس لحاظ سے جو اسکولس میں ٹیچرس کی ٹریننگ ہوتی ہے اس کے ساتھ پیرنٹس کی بھی ٹریننگ ہونی چاہیے. اس کے ساتھ ساتھ جو اسٹیٹ کے سورسز ہیں وہ سپورٹ ہونی چاہیے. پھر یہ ہے کہ اس میں جو لا انفورسنگ ہیں یا خاص طور پر جو لائرز ہیں ان کو کیسے مطلب انگیج کیا جائے. اور سب سے مین چیز ہے کہ اگر رپورٹنگ ہوتی ہے تو اس کو ان کو بچوں کو یا کسی بھی سورس کو پروٹیکٹ کیسے کیا جائے, اس چیز کے اوپر نہیں ہوتا. لاز موجود ہوتے ہیں لیکن سٹیپ لینے کے بیس پر جو وائلنس پھر ہو سکتا ہے, بائیکاٹ ہو سکتا ہے, یا اور بہت سی جو چیزیں ہوتی ہیں اس کو پوائنٹ آؤٹ نہیں. دوسرا جو ہائر لیول پر ہے, ہماری ایک بہت ہی اچھی یہاں اسلام آباد میں بڑی وائبرنٹ ایک شخصیت رائٹر تھیں, ان کا مطلب ایک مرڈر ہوا ہے لیکن اس کو کور اپ کر دیا گیا جی کہ یہ انہوں نے سوسائڈ کی ہے. تو میں نے ایک جگہ پر یہ بات کی تھی, انٹرنیشنل فورم ہی تھا, کہ اسلام آباد یا جو انٹلیکچوئل زون آف سوسائٹی ہے اس میں گھروں کے اندر جو ہے وہ کیمراز کا لگایا جانا, اور پھر مانیٹرنگ جو ہے وہ مانیٹرنگ سیلز ہوں, چاہے وہ اسلام آباد بیلٹ میں ہیں یا جہاں کہیں بھی, وہ باقاعدہ اس کو واچ کریں. بے شک اس کی ٹائم, اور اس میں بے شک پرائیویسی بھی ہائی جیک ہو سکتی ہے, لیکن ڈسپائٹ آر کے ہاں عموماً جو لائیوز ہیں وہ میٹر کرتی ہے, اور ان کو کیسے جو ہے وہ بچایا جائے. تو کریکٹیو میئرز میں یہ ایک دو مطلب ہے کہ چیزیں ہیں, ان کو کیسے جو ہے بہتر کیا جائے.
Well, that's a very tough question you have asked me. Standard operating procedure is if a domestic violence it happens, you're supposed to report it to police. But then, I mean, repercussions occur. As far as encouraging people to report, we have there are many stories out there where people have reported and have faced the repercussions, but that then at the end it was all right. So if you highlight those stories, then maybe all that. But then again, it will be a tough ask because
Court proceedings also are
yes, all that.
no speedy justice.
So, do you think that when it comes to economy, the economic problems in connection to domestic violence, it's basically a way of letting out anger? Like a
Yes.
man goes out and he gets exploited all day and he cannot do anything against his bosses, against like the places where he buys medicine and the stuff for his daily living, and accumulates that anger, and when he comes home, and it's a way of letting it out on whosoever he can let it out, and the only person at the home is the family members.
Yes, actually, that's one of the major causes of domestic violence. Basically, when things are not going well in the workplace, like economy is not doing well, or you have a very you have a superior who's a bit looks down upon you and all that. So you bottle up emotions and then you blow out, vent it out when you come home. Yes. Normally it is wrong, but that's how it is, unfortunately. Any further questions or comments?
दानियाल थैंक यू. थोड़ा सा इनजस्टिस इस तरह हो गया कि बारिश का दिन है आज, बाहर सिग्नल्स बंद हैं आर्ट की वजह से और आमदो रफ्त में बड़ी मुश्किल है. तो इस वजह से इतनी अच्छे मौजू पर उतनी ऑडियंस नहीं है जो होनी चाहिए थी यहाँ पे, लेकिन स्टिल दे आर वेरी गुड एंड पॉजिटिव साइंस के हमारे साथ ऑनलाइन हमारे दोस्त हैं, यहाँ पे भी जो हमारे साथ साथी मौजूद हैं उनमें अंसर भाई हैं या दानियाल हैं. मेल पार्टिसिपेशन जो यहाँ पर है वो आपके साथ और जो सर्वाइवर्स हैं उनके साथ ज़ाहिर खड़ी है, और आपने इतने अच्छे तरीके से इतनी कम्प्रिहेंसिव तरीके से सारे मौजू को सम अप किया. मैं बस उसमें यही ऐड करना चाहूँगा कि इंक्लूसिव है आपकी टॉक, इसमें आपने बच्चों को भी शामिल किया, जो मेल विक्टिम्स हैं उनको भी शामिल किया, जो ट्रांसजेंडर कम्युनिटी के हमारे साथी हैं उनको भी शामिल किया, यहाँ तक कि एब्यूज़र्स को भी शामिल किया कि आपको भी हेल्प की ज़रूरत है, आपको भी साइकोलॉजिकल काउंसलिंग और रिहैबिलिटेशन की ज़रूरत है. तो ये बहुत कंपैशनेट अप्रोच के साथ आपकी टॉक थी. आपने जो कहाँ से हेल्प लेनी है उसका भी जिक्र किया, तो बहुत अच्छी टॉक थी एंड आई मस्ट अप्रिशिएट यू. सिंस यू आर मेल योर सेल्फ, तो ये एक बहुत अच्छा साइन भी है, एक सिंबॉलिक जेस्चर भी है. आप हम सब जो हैं कि पैट्रियार्की में और इस जो मिसोजिनिस्ट कल्चर है हमारे यहाँ उसके अंदर प्रीडोमिनेटली तो वीमेन ही है ना जो शिकार बन रही होती हैं, आए रोज़ जो खबरें आ रही होती हैं, तो वो तन्हा नहीं है, उनके साथ हम सब लोग शामिल हैं उनको सपोर्ट करने में और उनकी आवाज़ बनने में. सो दे शुडंट फील अलोन एंड आइसोलेटेड. हमें मिलकर वी शुड कम टुगेदर एंड क्रिएट अ सोसाइटी दैट empowers survivors, और जो जहाँ पे सपोर्ट हो उनके लिए, जो ये जो विशियस साइकिल है एब्यूज़ का या वायलेंस का, उसको ख़त्म करने के लिए हम बाहमी कोशिश करें और टुगेदर वी कैन मेक डिफरेंस एंड कैन बिल्ड अ सेफर, मोर एम्पैथेटिक एंड मोर कंपैशनेट वर्ल्ड फॉर एवरीवन रिगार्डलेस ऑफ ये जो हमारे यहाँ जेंडर की तफरीक है, अकायद की तफरीक है, ज़ुबान, दर्जनों हमारे यहाँ तफरीक है, ये ख़त्म होनी चाहिए. मोर इंक्लूसिव, मोर कंपैशनेट और प्लूरलिस्टिक सोसाइटी तश्कील होनी चाहिए. आपकी टॉक, आपने जो आज इतनी अच्छी प्रेजेंटेशन दी है, मैं समझता हूँ कि उसमें ये एक चिड़िया की मिसाल है ना, कहीं है ना, आग लगी हुई है तो वो चिड़िया पानी का कतरा करी तो कहती है मैं कम से कम आग लगाने वालों में तो नहीं हूँ, आई एम ट्राइंग माई बेस्ट. तो आपने आज इतनी अच्छी एफर्ट की है एंड कीप इट अप एंड द ब्लैक होल इज़ थैंकफुल टू यू, वी ऑल एंड आवर ऑनलाइन ऑडियंस इज़ थैंकफुल टू यू. वेल डन.